Psalms 84. Let me get right into this. Verse number 10. The psalmist said this: "For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper. I would rather be a doorkeeper. Make me a greeter in the house of God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness." And as we are planning for launch, and we're here this morning, thank you all that were here for the launch training, the serve team training, and all that this morning. As we're getting ready for all of that, I look at this passage and I'm like, this is an appropriate passage for launch training. Like, week before launch, this is appropriate. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord than to dwell in it. I'm like, that's perfect, right? That's like, it's a biblical mandate to be a greeter at church. I'm like, that's it. That's biblical justification. I could not find a passage that said anything about making coffee at church. I could not find anything about picking up trash at church, but I did find a verse that said I would rather be a doorkeeper. This is our biblical justification for serving at our church, right? I mean, I should leverage this. The Bible says do it. So if you're not on the serve team, you're missing. I'm joking. I'm not gonna twist it around. But I do want to bring some context to what the Bible calls a doorkeeper. Sometimes, as you look through biblical texts, it talks about being a gatekeeper. It's kind of the same thing. They'll be synonymous, and we'll go back and forth this morning because we'll use both titles. Being a doorkeeper in the house of God, being a gatekeeper in the house of God. And let's give some context to what we're actually talking about here. So as you look biblically, this thing happened, and we talked about it last week as we ended the discussion, talked about the fact that David had this heart to build God a house, because the house of the Lord, the place where they came to worship God, was a tabernacle. It was basically a tent that they had set up. And David had this thing in his heart. He's like, I live in a palace, and the presence of God lives in a tent. Things are backwards here. And so David had this heart to build God a house, and he was getting ready to do it and making plans for it, everything. And the word of the Lord, the Bible says, came to David and said, it's a good thing that that's in your heart, but I'm not going to let you do it because you're a man of war. You've shed a lot of blood. You've been a warring king, and so I'm not going to allow you to build my house. And what God told him is, instead, David, I'm going to build your house, and not a physical house, but I'm going to build your lineage. I'm going to build the people that go beyond you. I'm going to bless the people that come after you in your family, and I'm going to allow Solomon, your son, to build me a house instead. So David is getting old. It's time to transition the kingship from David to Solomon, and they're making this shift of leadership, and they're planning on and they're working on getting everything in order to build God's house. This is Solomon's this is his thing. He's going to build. You may have heard of Solomon's temple. He's going to build the house of God. And so they're getting everything in order, and they're literally about to launch a church. It's the same thing. It's an Old Testament kind of deal, but they're about to launch a brand new church. They're building, going from a tent with this animal skin for covering, and it was just kind of rough cut looking stuff with some ornate things slathered on the outside, to they're going to build this ornate temple that is worthy of a God that they're going to worship. And so they're literally launching a church. They're doing more or less exactly what we're doing, getting ready to kind of start something new, and they're putting all the pieces in order. They're doing the same thing that we're doing this morning. They're getting people in the right spot. We need you here in the nursery, and you in the kids' church, and we need you to pour coffee, and we need you out front sitting on the sidewalk, smiling at everybody that walks by. We're gonna ride that to death. I'm sorry. So watch how this plays out, because they're literally, the Bible said they're casting lots. It's kind of a drawing straw sort of a thing. They're deciding who does what. And it's not like, I feel called to clean the windows. It's, no, this is your job. We drew it out of a hat. You became the window washer. This is your job. And so they're setting everything in place. Watch how this plays out. The Bible says in 1 Chronicles 26, verse number 12, they are assigning the job of a gatekeeper. These divisions of the gatekeepers, corresponding to their chief men, had duties just as their brothers did, ministering in the house of the Lord. So there was all kinds of jobs in the temple. There were people who, it was their job to wash things, and it was their job to keep the candles lit, and it was people's job to make sure that certain things were set in certain places, and everything was changed out at certain intervals, and there was a lot going on. And they came to the point and they said, we need people at the door. We need gatekeepers. We need doorkeepers. We need greeters. Now, I don't think they did like churches do now. They didn't have the cute signs that say, you look great today. They didn't have like parking lot attendants ushering people in with umbrellas. They had people literally, and it was their job to stand at the gate of the temple on the outside and let people come in and come out. Now just put yourself in that place for a moment, because there are a lot of things that I enjoy doing. Standing in one spot all day long, opening the door is probably not it. I can think of a whole lot more glamorous jobs at church than now this wasn't like we get there at 10 and we're done at 12. This is like all day long. My job is to stand there and open up the gate and close it. Welcome to the temple. Whatever we do at church isn't that bad, right? Like so they've got this job. They're literally the gatekeepers. They stand there all day long, and they're assigning this task. So you can imagine as people are being assigned this, their eyes are like, couldn't I at least get candle duty? I mean, I like fire. And they cast lots by their father's house, small and great alike, for their gates. So they've decided they're gatekeepers, and they're going to figure out which gate they got to stand at. The lot for the east fell to Shelemiah. They cast lots also for his son Zechariah, a shrewd counselor, and his lot came out for the north. Obed-Edom's came out for the south, and to his sons were allotted the gatehouse. Now, as we look, Shupin and Hosa were assigned the western gate. Zechariah got the north gate. Shelemiah got the eastern gate. And all of this in my mind is pretty mundane. And this is a very mundane, boring job, a boring task, until they got to the moment that it's time to assign the south gate. Now, the south gate is a little different. To understand this, you have to get a little bit of geography. Get your head wrapped around that just a moment, because just to the south of the temple was the palace. So what ends up happening is everybody who has the other gates just gets to let in whoever's coming that day. It's kind of they have a certain order and a flow to how they do things. And so there are certain things they can expect. But the guy who's at the south gate understands something. The guy who's at the south gate understands that his day doesn't look like everyone else's. Because the guy at the south gate gets to stand there, and there's something in him that carries himself a little bit different. Why? Because King Solomon may come to the temple today. And so the guy who gets assigned the south gate, Obed-Edom and his family, understands something, that everything changes, because there's no glamour involved in being a doorkeeper. There's no, it's not a real prestigious title unless you're the guy who gets to see the king on a daily basis. Unless you're the guy who gets to open up the door for the king to come through. Why? Because you know he's coming from that direction. And the mundaneness and the boringness of that job changes upon the assignment of Obed-Edom's family to the south gate. Because here's something we've got to understand. They had a boring task that had potential for royal encounters. And the reason was the location. They were at the south gate. They were responsible for opening the gate of the king. And every time King Solomon, you read about, now this dude like showed up. He showed up like he was dressed to the nines. He had it together. You find it referenced in the New Testament. It's talking about and King Solomon being arrayed like the lily. He was this dude had it together for whatever reason. He showed up, and Obed-Edom's family got to be the ones who recognized him, who interacted with him, who were able to open the gate for him. Because when the king gets involved, I want you to catch this, when the king gets involved with a normal task, when the king gets involved in a mundane task, whenever something that you're doing feels repetitive and it's just like you're beating your head against the wall, when the king gets involved, normal life becomes life-changing experiences. Just normal life becomes pretty exciting when the king gets involved. I imagine at the end of the day, everybody's talking about how bad their feet hurt and how bad it was and how boring it was. And then Obed-Edom shows up and he's like, hey, boys, did y'all see Solomon show up today? They're like rolling their eyes like every day. Because when the king gets involved, normal life becomes life-changing experience. Here is what's important. I want to give you a few things that Obed-Edom experienced because he was at that gate. Number one, they were the first to know. That family was the first to know that the king was coming to the temple. They knew about it before anyone else did. They saw him leave the palace. They saw him marching up the road. They could hear the trumpets before he ever got there. They were the first to know that the king was coming to the temple. Secondly, they were the first to honor the king when he arrived. Before anybody else saluted him, before anyone else bowed to him, they had the opportunity to. They had a reason, thirdly, to keep showing up and doing their job. Why? Because when the king gets involved, normal tasks become potential royal encounters. Now, I'm going to obviously make a parallel here because likewise, here's what we're doing. The fact is that we are planting a church. We are creating something that does not currently exist. And so that kind of makes us gatekeepers, right? That kind of puts us in the same situation because somehow now I stand between what God wants to do and the people He wants to do it in. This church stands in the middle of what God wants to do and the people who are going to be recipients of that. So here's what I understand as someone who's kind of the gatekeeper for what's going on here. I am the first to know that He's coming. That's why we've been gathering together. That's why we've been doing training. That's why we've been doing launch preparation. That's why we've been praying together and having microchurch together. Why? Because we know something's about to happen. There are people who are in this community who do not have a clue, and you already know about it. What in the world then does it do me any good if I know that it's happening and I don't prepare myself? If Obed-Edom were to know that the king was coming and his like shirt's untucked and his like shoes untied and he's like his hair's all messed up and he looks like he just rolled out of... No, that's not happening. He knows the king is coming and he is going to make the appropriate preparations, right? I want to be the first to know when the king is going to show up. I want to be the first to honor him when he arrives to the house. Listen, that's this morning when we're worshiping and we're having church together, I want to be one who's like, push the button, boom, I'm there. Like I'm all in. I'm ready to. And so here's what I'm telling you as people who are on the launch team. It is our job. We are doorkeepers. We are gatekeepers. We are the ones who know that the king is coming. We know our position, and it is my job to honor him when he gets here. It's my job. I want to be the first one with hands lifted. I want to be the first one who's singing out. I want to be the first one who's honoring the presence of God when we come together. Because guess what? If we don't do it, no one else will. Here's what's going to, I'm just going to be real plain this morning. The culture of our church depends on what the gatekeepers do. And if we wait for someone else to teach us how to worship, nobody will ever get it. And if we wait for someone else to do it for us, and if we come in here like wishing we were somewhere else, guess what? The culture of that will cultivate itself. And before we know it, we'll have a bunch of people who show up at 10:15 wishing that they were somewhere else. Seeing how late I can get here and still flying under the radar and how soon I can leave. Listen, I'm not talking about I'm late sometimes. I'm talking about the fact that I am a gatekeeper and the things that I do will set a precedent for how this church looks. What if we replicate your worship and call it a church? What if we take the way that you keep your gate and we make that the way it's done? What if we take my prayer life and we just give it to everybody and make that everyone's prayer life? Do I want you to have my prayer life, or would I be selling you short? When the worship team's up here and we're all in, and I love I love watching this. It's just like pouring it all out like at the feet of Jesus. And if I'm just a spectator, if I give my participation to everyone and call it the church, what will they be getting? I am a gatekeeper. In reality, we are doorkeepers. I didn't come today to give you like a 3-step, like here's how we be better Christians or becoming more like Jesus. I came to remind you that you are a doorkeeper, that the King is coming to the temple. What in the world are we going to do about it? That we are those who stand in the gap between God and people. I am, as what the New Testament calls, an ambassador of Christ. And I stand in the gap between those two, and it's my job to somehow help connect God with the people that He's searching for. I want to be the first to honor Him when He arrives to the temple. And I want to keep in mind why I continue to do what I do, and that is the fact that there is a King coming. I love people. I love Hattiesburg. I love this community. I bleed black and gold. Like, I love this place with everything in me. I found myself in a place that I love just as much with a heart to get back right here. And God worked it out where He just gave it to us. We're in South America talking about moving back to Hattiesburg, and their door's not even open. All of a sudden we get a phone call and go, hey, are you still interested in doing ministry in Hattiesburg? Yeah, we love this place. But the reason I do what I do can't be because I just love Hattiesburg, or I just love you, or I just love people. But there is a King coming. And ultimately, my heart is bigger for Jesus than it is for people. Ultimately, my drive has to come deeper because some days I'm going to wake up and I don't like people. You may be there this morning. It's all right. Some days you'll wake up and you don't want to talk to anyone. Some days you'll wake up and you will have done what you do and realize that you got hurt in the process. And I need to know that the reason I continue to show up to my door, the reason I keep showing up to my gate is because there is a King coming. There's one that's headed from the palace to the temple, and I need to know that when He gets here, He's honored correctly. I need to know when He gets here, someone opens the gate up for Him and lets Him in to the situation. I am in reality a doorkeeper. Here's what I know. This community needs a King to show up. Downtown Hattiesburg needs a King to show up here. Your family needs a King to show up. There are marriages that are going to be affected by this church who need a King to show up and step into the situation. And here's what I know. It is my responsibility to open up the door and let Him in. Why? Because I have been called to be a gatekeeper. I've been called to be the middleman between Jesus and people of this earth. He could do it without me, but He chooses to let me be a part. We are gatekeepers. We're here to open the door for broken marriages. We're here to open the door for orphans. We're here to open the door for people who have no other hope in this life. It's my job to make sure that they understand that there is a way out of the life they've been living, and His name is Jesus. There's a King coming to the temple. You say you're fired up this morning. I absolutely am. Why? Because we are on the cusp of revival breaking out in Hattiesburg. Why? Because someone is called to open up the door. Someone is called to find out where Jesus is and allow Him into a situation that currently no one allows Him in. Can I tell you something? I've been called. I feel the weight of making sure that somebody opens up the door to Jesus and He has a way in to the lives and to the families and to the people of this community. It's my job. It's my calling. I'm a doorkeeper. You may be on the north gate. You may be on the east gate, but I live on the south side. I open up the south side gate. Why? Because that's what faces the temple. And anytime Jesus wants in, He comes by me. Not because He needs my approval, not because He needs me, but because He allows me to be a part of what He's doing. You've got coworkers who need somebody to open up the door. And they don't have a clue how to get to God. And they need someone to open up the door. You know, I'm awkward by nature. Socially, I'm awkward. Real awkward. I get that stare at you, confused. I don't know what to say next. You ever like talk to people and you don't know what to say next and you miss what they just said because you were trying to figure out what to say next? that hit a D with some of them. Like, yes, I'm there. I'm with you. I can be so. When you're already socially awkward, sometimes it's hard. You know, people are like, "Well, just share your faith." Well, when you already can't figure out how to talk about anything, talking about something is really difficult. And like, you know, did you see the newest Marvel movie? No, but have you seen The Passion of the Christ? Just... Hey, you want to hit nukes for lunch? No, but have you met the bread of life? That's probably not going to work. And so understanding how in the world this door works is important. Because I'm just awkward. And so finding out how to open up the door in a conversation can sometimes be difficult, right? Like I'm talking to me and I want to share my faith and I want to be a testimony. I want to open up the door for Jesus. And I find that just me personally, I'm not great at it. But here's what I've realized. That when somebody asks me to go to nukes, it's probably not the right time to bring up the bread of life. The joy of my salvation. Just go to nukes. But when I feel the door kind of feel somebody knocking, is when someone goes, you know, me and my wife just don't seem to be on the same page right now. When I don't have to manipulate the situation, and I don't have to try to underhandedly leverage the conversation back to Jesus, but whenever someone's going through life and Jesus goes, there's the door right there. Just open it. You don't have to cut a hole in the wall, just open the door. Because I will meet people this week who need someone to open up the door to Jesus in their life. And if you start looking, if you start paying attention, it becomes pretty clear whenever there's a door there or when there's not. Here's what David said about doorkeepers. David said in Psalm 24, I love this passage. He goes on, this is a whole like, who will ascend to the hill of the Lord and who will stand in his holy presence, like he that has clean hands and a pure heart. And he goes on, like this whole psalm kind of plays out. And like the whole thing, it's like this sequential logical process. And then the song kind of has this hard break. And then he goes into this, and I feel like it's kind of like one of those like songs that's clicking along. Like everything's like a worship song. Like, oh, that's good, And then like, all of a sudden they take it up a key and hit the bridge real hard. You like build it straight into it. I feel like that's what happened in this song. David's writing and it's like, who will ascend to the hill of the Lord? And it's, we're getting along, we're doing. And then all of a sudden it comes this hard pause. And then he just goes right into it with exclamation marks. He goes, lift up your head, O you gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? I wish I knew the word, like the melody of the song. I would get down with it. I would make you endure it. And that's on y'all. The Lord strong, who is this King? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. He said, lift up your heads, O gates, and lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. And he said it one more time. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Now, let's understand something. We know that the Lord is strong and mighty. We know that the Lord is mighty in battle. We know that He's ready to come into the city. We know He's ready to change families and change lives and to do the things that only God can do. We know that He's ready to show up in our workplace and in our schools. But what do we do in response to that? Here's what David said. He said, look up. Just lift up your heads and the King of glory will come in. Now, what in the world does that actually mean? That means exactly what it says. It means if I'm going to allow Jesus into my situation, I need to lift up my head and turn my attention to Him. I've got to somehow look for the fact that He's coming from the palace and He's making His way down to the temple. I've got to look for Him. I'm going to tell you something. Obed-Edom didn't spend his days looking down at the dirt, kicking up, and all of a sudden realize that there was King Solomon standing right in front of me. He knew King Solomon was coming a long way off. Why? Because he was looking for him. That was the only thing that was going to brighten his day. That was the only thing that was going to separate a great day from a terrible day, as if the king showed up. It was the only thing that made it less than more than a boring day and turned it into a royal day, as if the king showed up. So in my own life, what do? I've got to turn my attention to him. I've got to look up. We lift up our heads and we open the door, the Bible said. Here, I'm just going to tell you something. You are the gatekeeper. If you are saved and you leave your house, when you are at Walmart, you are the gatekeeper of Walmart. When you go to poor little Dollar General, do you know that you are heaven's access point to the place you go? That when you show up to work tomorrow, I want you to understand something. When you park your car and you lock the door and you walk inside that office building, can I tell you something? You are the direct line to heaven. You are the person that stands between people who are dealing with the worst situation they've ever been in before and the very King of glory. And that's what David said. He said, lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, everlasting doors. And the King of glory will come in, because he is strong and mighty, and he is mighty in battle. And you can't fix them, and you can't fix them, and we can't help them. But I can be the person who helps associate someone with the King of glory and open up the door to Jesus in their life. We say it like this around here a lot, right? We are trying to make the goodness of Jesus unavoidable in this city. I've got my head lifted up and I'm looking for what he's doing. We lift up our heads, we open the door. Psalm 121, I love David, or the psalmist, I don't know this, David. The psalmist said, I will lift up my eyes. I will lift up my eyes to the hills from where my help comes from. He said, my help didn't come from a book. It didn't come from Netflix. It didn't come from gathering up 90 gazillion likes on Instagram. He said, my help didn't come from a bottle. It didn't come from a pill. My help didn't come from the neighbor down the street. My help doesn't come from my spouse. My help doesn't come from anything else. He said, my help comes from the Lord. He said, the Lord who made heaven and earth. He goes on to say, he will not suffer your foot to move. He doesn't slumber. He doesn't sleep. He'll keep you. He'll be your shade. He'll be the one on your right hand. He'll be the one that goes with you. Jesus, they said, was a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Can I tell somebody something this morning? You are a doorkeeper, and everything that you need doesn't come from the situation around you. It comes from lifting up yourself, your eyes to him, from where your help comes from. For the people that are going through life, that deal with you on a daily basis, can I tell you something? Their help doesn't come from you. Their help comes from the Lord. So more than anything, look to Jesus. That's simple, right? That's like, yeah, we got that. More than anything, look to Jesus. Check, got it. But how many times do I get so wound up in what I'm going through that I get so absorbed into the situation I'm in, I never even realized that the King's at the door. I want you guys to come on. We're going to bring this thing to a close. I got to stop. Today, I told you I didn't come to preach like a 4-step get better at whatever. I came simply to remind someone, ma'am, sir, you're the gatekeeper of your house. Disciple of Jesus, follower of Christ, you show up to work. Paul talked about the weight of glory. It's like this eternal weight, this thing that kind of stays in the back of my mind. It rolls over in my heart. It's called a burden. when I understand that there's this person that has an eternity somewhere. And right now they have no hope. And there's this King of glory who's strong and mighty in battle and able to do the impossible. Offers life abundant, offers life eternal. And ultimately it's God that does the changing, right? It's ultimately God that does the drawing. It's ultimately God that does the changing of a life. But somehow I find myself standing right in the middle of them. And I can't argue them in. I can't like mean my way for people to get back to Jesus. Like I'm just going to like beat them with my Bible until they get it finally. But I find myself in conversations where they go, you know, I don't know what's going on, but it feels like my kids are becoming more and more distant from me. And I hear the knock. In conversations where people are going, you know what, I'm constantly anxious, and I'm constantly stressed, and I'm constantly without any peace whatsoever, and in that moment I hear a knock. And I realize that I'm standing there holding the door, and on one side is the King of glory, and on the other is someone with an eternal soul. And I don't have to fix them. I don't have to patch them up, make them better. I simply just open it up. I just open up the door. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors, that the King of glory will come in. Today I came for the purpose of lifting someone up. You may be struggling this morning. I'm just going to kind of pronounce that over. Be lifted up. Be encouraged this morning. Why? Because there is a King of glory who's strong and mighty. He's mighty in battle. And I don't know what you're dealing with, what you're going through. But I want to be in the appropriate place, like Obed-Edom on that south gate, paying attention to what's going on. Because at any moment, the palace doors may open up, and I know the King's coming. And when the King gets involved, normal life becomes life-changing experience. Experiences that turn eternity around. Not because because the King got involved. A normal Sunday like this becomes an opportunity to let Him in. This week becomes a week full of potential for God to do something supernatural and eternal. Here's what I know today. That this week we're going to find ourselves in places where we have the opportunity to open up the door between heaven and earth. And I want to be paying attention. I want my head up, looking for Jesus to get involved. I want you to stand with us all over the house. We're going to bring this to a close.